The marble floors of the grand mansion sparkled as the morning sun poured through towering glass windows, casting warm light across the gilded halls. The household bustled with quiet activity, maids moving about swiftly yet silently, ensuring everything remained flawless for the wealthy family that owned the estate. Yet amidst all the wealth, one room in particular carried a strange silence, almost as if it wanted to stay hidden from the world. Inside, a young boy stood with his tiny frame pressed tightly against the wall, his face buried into the cold surface. He stayed there, unmoving, as though the wall itself offered him some kind of refuge no one else could provide. His name was Ethan, the only son of one of the richest men in the country, a boy who could have anything he wanted with a single word. But despite all the riches around him, Ethan chose to hide. Maria, the new maid, had only been working at the mansion for a few weeks. She was a kind woman in her late 20s with gentle eyes and a warm smile. Unlike many of the staff who feared speaking too much in front of the family, Maria had a natural tenderness that made her want to reach out, especially when she noticed someone hurting. That morning, as she entered Ethan's room to tidy up, she found him in that strange position, his small body pressed against the wall, shoulders trembling ever so slightly. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should interrupt, but her heart tugged at her. Slowly, she approached him and said softly, "Master Ethan, why are you standing like that? Are you all right?" At first, he didn't respond. His fingers curled tightly against the wallpaper, and she could hear the faintest sound of him trying to control his breathing. She crouched down gently beside him, her voice even softer. "Ethan, you don't have to hide from me. Can you tell me what's wrong?" Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he whispered 3 words so fragile that they barely reached her ears. "I'm not enough." Maria's heart sank. She looked at the boy, confused and aching inside. What could make a child born into such wealth and privilege feel such painful emptiness? She touched his shoulder lightly. "Ethan, why would you think that? You're more than enough." He shook his head violently, pressing his face harder into the wall. "No, Daddy says I'm weak. He says boys like me are disappointments. I can't make him proud." His voice broke, and Maria realized the trembling in his shoulders wasn't from fear, but from holding back tears. Maria closed her eyes for a moment, trying to compose herself. She had heard stories about the billionaire father, Richard Cole, a man known for his ruthless business tactics and cold demeanor. To the world, he was powerful, untouchable, and intimidating. To his son, he was someone whose approval was a mountain too high to ever climb. That afternoon, Maria made a silent vow to herself. If no one else in this mansion could give Ethan the love he needed, she would. Days turned into weeks, and Maria made it her mission to be a quiet source of comfort in Ethan's life. She didn't try to replace his parents, who were always too busy in their boardrooms and charity galas. Instead, she listened when he wanted to talk, played small games when he felt lonely, and whispered gentle encouragement whenever his father's harsh words cut too deeply. One evening, Maria found Ethan sketching quietly in his room. The drawings were surprisingly detailed for his age, buildings, bridges, and cityscapes. "These are beautiful, Ethan," she said with genuine awe. He looked at her cautiously. "They're not good enough. Daddy says art is useless. He wants me to learn business." Maria smiled gently. "Ethan, sometimes the things our hearts love most are the very things that make us special. Don't ever think it's useless." For the first time, she saw a flicker of light in his eyes, though it was quickly smothered by doubt. One day, Richard Cole returned home earlier than usual. His towering presence filled the room as he walked into Ethan's study. Ethan, startled, dropped his sketchbook and scrambled to his feet. "Good evening, Father," he said in a trembling voice. Richard glanced at the papers scattered on the floor and frowned. "Still wasting time with this nonsense," he muttered, picking up a drawing. He tore it down the middle without hesitation. "Dreams don't build empires, Ethan. Discipline does." Ethan's face went pale, and Maria's heart burned with anger as she watched from the corner, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. But she knew speaking out could cost her job. That night Ethan was back at the wall again, hiding his tears. Maria knelt beside him once more. "Ethan," she whispered, "sometimes grown-ups don't see what's in front of them, but I see you. I see how talented and kind you are. And one day the whole world will too." His eyes shimmered with tears, but for the first time, he allowed himself to lean into her arms. Years passed and Ethan grew older, but Maria's words never left him. She continued to be his quiet anchor, the one person who reminded him he was more than his father's cold judgments. Ethan kept drawing, secretly at first, then more boldly as he grew confident in his own gift. He sketched not just buildings but visions of communities, places where people could live, dream, and belong. When Ethan turned 18, Richard planned a grand party to introduce his son to the business world. All the wealthy elites were there, expecting to hear Ethan speak about stock markets and corporate growth. But when Ethan stepped onto the stage, holding not a speech but a portfolio of his designs, the entire hall went silent. "I may never be the businessman my father wanted me to be," Ethan began, his voice steady, "but I have a vision of building something different. Cities filled not with just towers of glass and steel, but with hope and belonging. Spaces where people feel like they matter." He unveiled his drawings, stunning designs of eco-friendly communities, schools with open courtyards, and hospitals filled with natural light. The guests gasped in awe. Investors who had once come to honor Richard found themselves captivated by Ethan instead. Richard, sitting stiffly in his chair, looked on with disbelief. But Maria, watching from the shadows, felt tears streaming down her face. The boy who once hid against the wall whispering, "I'm not enough," now stood before the world declaring his worth. The journey was not easy. Richard tried to crush Ethan's plans, calling them childish and unrealistic. But the world had already seen Ethan's brilliance, and opportunities opened like doors he never thought possible. With Maria by his side, Ethan went on to design real communities, shelters for the homeless, schools for underprivileged children, parks in neighborhoods long forgotten. Each project carried a piece of his heart, and each time he saw someone smile in one of his spaces, he remembered Maria's words, "I see you." Years later, when Maria had grown older and her hair had turned silver, Ethan visited her small home. He carried with him a framed sketch, the first building he ever designed that had been constructed. "This belongs to you," he said softly, placing it in her hands. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Ethan, why would you give this to me?" "Because," he said, his voice breaking with emotion, "you're the reason I believed I was enough." Maria pulled him into an embrace, and for a moment, he was that little boy again, the one who once hid from the world but had finally found his place in it. The story of Ethan Cole became an inspiration far beyond the walls of his father's mansion. He was proof that greatness wasn't built on wealth or ruthless ambition, but on love, compassion, and the courage to believe in oneself. And it all began the day a maid asked him why he hid his face against the wall, and listened when he whispered 3 shocking words. In the end, Ethan taught the world something his father never could, that sometimes the most powerful empires are not made of money, but of kindness.